capitalism. It's a great thing, right?
Yes, capitalism is a wonderful thing. It is the best political system because it is the only system, capitalism is the only system that protects property rights and individual rights, thereby allowing individuals the freedom to pursue their own happiness.
Capitalism leads to technological advancement, economic development, and human freedom.
And all that too, and that's why it's great because the logical conclusion of allowing people to pursue their reason and to pursue happiness is you get a lot of good things like better technology, better standards of living, and so on.
That is, until it doesn't. There's no question that the development of capitalism was a great thing for human society. Unfortunately, over time, capitalism has spun wildly out of control, transforming rapidly from a force for positive social change into a brutal system of oppression that's holding humanity back and destroying billions of lives. To
By what standard?
understand why, let's first take a look at the system which preceded capitalism, feudalism. Back in the days of feudalism, society was agrarian. The most important product was food, so the most important means of production were farmlands. At the top of feudal society were the feudal lords who owned the land. At the bottom were the peasants who worked the land. There were other classes too, like the church and merchants and tradespeople like stonemasons and cobblers and coopers. There was friction and conflict between these classes from time to time, but for the most part under feudalism, society was pretty much static for hundreds of years, especially for the peasant class.
Yeah, feudalism is bad for everyone, even the people on the top, like the aristocracy and the nobility and the kings. Who do you think lives a better life? A person who lives lower middle class, even lower class in a moderately free society, moderately capitalist society? Or the king, the ruler of a feudalist society during the Middle Ages, prior to capitalism? What life would you rather live? Would you rather be King Henry VIII or King Louis of France? Or would you rather be an industrial worker in America today? Or even a French fry cook at McDonald's today?
Under feudal society, if you were born a peasant, you were probably going to die as a peasant. You were essentially the property of your feudal lord, so there wasn't much opportunity for advancement or changing careers. It sucked. The other classes were pretty static too. Noble titles were passed down from father to son, and there were very few opportunities to break into the aristocratic class. Merchants and tradespeople formed powerful guilds to prevent competition and to control access to their professions. Under feudalism, the people in power did their best to restrict and control social mobility.
Yeah, because when you have an unjust system where it's one group of people ruling over another, then there is no freedom. There is no means of reason. There's only that brute force is the only criterion of social conduct. So force and revolutions and civil wars and tension, so to speak, that's logically going to happen.
As capitalism began to emerge hand in hand with industrialism, things began to change. Early capitalists gave peasants opportunities they never had before. Now, instead of toiling your life away on a peasant farm for a feudal lord, you could go to work for a capitalist in exchange for wages and try to advance your lot in life.
I like how that's the only option presented. Yeah, oh, you can just go work for a capitalist. What about starting a business? What about inventing a product, inventing a machine? Or, just starting, doing your own thing, being a freelancer? A lot of options in capitalism. But yeah, when the more capitalist a society becomes, the more jobs and opportunities there are. And it's much better and much preferable to merely be the property of some landlord as under feudalism.
As capitalism progressed, the old social order of feudalism rapidly fell to pieces. Feudal lords were usurped by wealthy capitalists who owned land and factories. The ancient craft guilds found that they couldn't compete with modern industrial production. And the newly formed working class developed a degree of social mobility as they could move from job to job trying to seek higher wages.
See, under capitalism, you can move from job to job and seek higher wages. You have the right to compete on the open labor market. Sounds pretty great to me.
This all sounds pretty great, right? Well, it was for a while. Unfortunately, the good times did not last. Over time, capitalist processes lead to increasing economic instability, inequality, and societal destruction.
Actually, you're thinking of government intervention.
To understand why, let's take a look at how capitalism functions.
When you have government intervention in the economy, you get a lot of distortions. You eliminate freedom from the market, and that makes it more difficult for people to trade with each other and trade honestly with each other on the free market. And then on top of that, you get distortions, which eventually creates uncertainty in the marketplace, and then as a result, you eventually get recessions and booms and busts, and the market needs to correct itself.
Capitalism, all of the old classes of lords and peasants and craftsmen and merchants have been swept away. Now there are basically just two major classes: the capitalists who own the means of production, the factories and farms and other businesses of the world, and the workers who perform the labor that keeps the wheels of the economy turning.
Get the fuck out of here with that nonsense. Oh, there's only two classes. There's only two classes. Says who? Who decides who's all this nonsense I hear about the working class? By what standard is someone working class or not? I saw a tweet the other day that said that, people who make $250,000 a year, they don't know what it's like to be working class. Well, are they not working for that $250,000, that $250,000 a year? Is a lawyer who works 80 hours a week, are they not working class? After all, they're working a job. Only two working classes. Again, who decides who's in what class? It's totally arbitrary. I make this point about the top 1% all the time. It's 3 million people. Why? Who designated that the top 1%? Who decided that was the class of people? Why not make it 2%? Why not make it the top 0.5%? Why not make it the top 3%? The top 8%? It's totally arbitrary. Not to mention, people like Andrew Carnegie debunk this stupid notion of classes by his mere existence. Andrew Carnegie came to America with nothing. As a kid, he was poor, came with an immigrant family, had to work jobs as a kid for compensation of what would be, I think, $35 a week in today's money. He had to work as a Morse code reader for train stations. And he eventually became one of the bourgeoisie, so to speak, one of the captains of industry, the capitalist class. Became worth billions of dollars, one of the richest people in history. Andrew Carnegie. Was he a traitor to his class? Why wasn't he a deterministic moron like this nonsense this knucklehead NonCompete is pushing? Why didn't Carnegie just give his allegiance to his class? Why should people have any sort of allegiance to their arbitrary grouping in the eyes of Marxists? It's like I did this video the other day about that guy who wrote the book Winners Take All. He was on MSNBC. And I forgot to address this point, but he mentioned that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was a traitor to his class. Why does anyone have any allegiance or any obligation to serve their class? Get the fuck out of here.
Capitalists not only own the means of production, but they also get to keep a significant cut of whatever the worker earns or produces in the form of profit. Basically,
yeah, and people need to make profits in order to stay in business.
The capitalist bosses steal labor value from workers and transfer that wealth to themselves. In order for capitalist institutions...
No, they don't steal the labor. If you can find instances where someone is not living up to their end of the bargain, yeah, that's theft, that's fraud, and that's what government is for. But if someone's just offering people jobs and people are happily taking those jobs, it's a win-win transaction. They're not stealing the labor. They're not stealing the money. They're saying, hey, we need if the worker is getting paid more money than the value they're contributing, then the capitalist is operating at a loss and he's not going to be in business for very long. I know reality sometimes is a pain in the ass, but sometimes you got to deal with it.
To survive, they have to...
Actually, all the time you got to deal with reality. You can't... The harder you run from reality, the harder reality will run up and punch you right in the mouth.
Turn a profit for the capitalists who own them. Otherwise, they'll be forced out of business by more ruthless competitors. Capitalist institutions literally can't concern themselves with anything but profits, or basically they'll die. Nearly all of the efforts of human civilization are now yoked to the will of capitalists who own the factories.
Everyone has to worry about profits, by the way. You can't live life unless you're profitable, unless you're productive in some sort of manner. You won't survive for long.
The financial institutions, the mass media, the social networks, the tech companies, the medical and pharmaceutical companies, they own everything. So they get to set the agenda for our society.
Yeah, if you own a business, if you own property, you get to decide what to do with it and how it goes.
And what kind of agenda do capitalists have? Well, it's actually really simple. Capitalism steers humanity toward one end and one end only: ever increasing profits for capitalists. See, capitalists don't really care about the welfare of...
Again, capitalism is just all about freeing the individual. It's not about steering humanity in one direction or another.
Workers or protecting the environment. They can't, because those things aren't profitable. Capitalism doesn't allow for businesses to be driven by ethics or morals or scruples. Only building profits will allow a company to survive.
And building profits, first of all, is moral. It's moral to be productive and to create wealth. That is moral. But there's no money in, protecting the environment? You don't think there would be any nature preservatories that are operating on a profit? No national parks could be privatized, operate at a profit? There's still going to be people that want to go camping and want to go hunting and want to go whitewater rafting. You don't think there's any profit motive into preserving the environment? Not to mention, often pollution violates other people's property rights. So again, there's a proper role of government in that respect. You can't just burn tires on your property and let the smoke go onto your neighbor's property. You can't just dump garbage onto your neighbor's backyard.
Anything that reduces profitability is inherently harmful to a capitalist entity. Sure, sometimes profitability does line up with good causes. Sometimes it's cheaper to be more environmentally sustainable, for instance, or maybe donating to a charity will net a big fat tax break.
I believe I obviously have a lot of issues with PragerU, but they have a good video from Bert Folsom, whose book I read, and he talked about how J.D. Rockefeller was often always try to find a use for oil and the byproducts of oil. He never wanted to waste any resources when refining oil. So yeah, a lot of times it is in a business's best interest to get the most they can out of the resources they're trying to exploit, so to speak.
Break for the capitalist, or maybe it's just good marketing to support a worthy cause. But this is all just incidental. Don't be fooled for a moment into believing that capitalism cares about the welfare of society. It's all about the profit.
Again, capitalism is just a political system. Capitalism doesn't care about... See, he's trying to conflate capitalists with a system. Yeah, and yeah, it will be in a capitalist's best interest to often look out for society. Not that that should be their main concern, but who wants to live in a backward society where things are bad? It's often in someone's best interest to be progressive, so to speak.
Keep in mind that there are only two ways to increase profits. A company can either increase prices for consumers or reduce costs. Competition tends to put a hard limit on what a business can...
Yeah, reduce costs. Doesn't that drive up the standard of living? Doesn't that alleviate people, make people less reliant on their work? It allows people to work less because goods and services are now cheaper.
Charged. So as businesses become more powerful, they will always seek to eliminate competition and create monopolies so that they can charge consumers.
Oh God, monopolies. Again, monopolies are only possible through government intervention and government favors that locks out and discourages competition.
As much as possible to maximize company profits. When it comes to driving down costs, the primary cost for almost every business is human labor. As such,
amongst other things,
capitalist businesses are always seeking to pay workers as little as possible or just eliminate them through things like automation.
Again, the big context he's dropping here is that, the reason why they want to reduce costs is because it's more, you please your customers. Who's really driving down the costs here? Is it the capitalists? Or is it their consumers, their customers, who don't want to pay more for goods and services? This is the law of supply and demand. Who wants to pay more for a good or a service when they don't have to? Really, who's really responsible? And yeah, if paying less for goods and services, that's good for everyone.
To drive down wages as much as they can get away with. Naturally, this leads to tremendous accumulation of wealth for the capitalist class and ever-increasing wealth inequality between workers and capitalists. By definition, capitalism will always lead to the rich getting richer and the poor getting way more poor.
No, everyone gets richer under capitalism. Not that that's the point, but it's a fact. Even the poorest of the poor benefit and get richer under capitalism by mere fact of innovation and rises in standards of living, lower costs for goods and services. Again, he talks about, these businesses, the capitalists, they're all about worried about driving down costs and prices. Isn't that good for the poorest people? Doesn't that allow poorer people to buy goods and services and raise their standard of living?
A lot of folks try to argue that capitalism can be reformed, that capitalists can be restrained through regulation and legislation that would put limits on the abuses capitalists can make to the people of the world and to our environment. This liberal position cruelly ignores the fact that even the most effective regulations and reforms do nothing to correct the...
This cartoonage that's on display here, just total zero-sum nonsense. Wealth is created in a free society. It's not redistributed.
Power imbalances of society. Any such reforms are destined to be inadequate because they don't disrupt who ultimately holds the power in the system. As long as capitalists hold the reins of the means of production, they will always hold virtually limitless power over society.
By the way, everyone and anyone in a capitalist society has the ability and the right to eventually own some or a lot of means of production. If you want to start owning some means of production, here's a thought. Start investing in the stock market and buying pieces of corporations.
Another major myth about capitalism is the idea of meritocracy. Capitalist propaganda seeks to convince us that hard work and good ideas will rise to the top, and that anyone can become a rich capitalist if they're willing to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what tends to happen when you make and produce goods and services that many people are willing to buy. If that's going to make everyone's life better and happier, yeah, that's what happens when you have good ideas. Of course, a lot of bad ideas, a lot of bad products become popular for dumb reasons. I'm sure most people can think of terrible movies, terrible musicians that are worth millions of dollars because their fans are stupid and have bad taste. But hey, that happens. But no, for the most part, yeah, iPhones. Why would people be spending hundreds, thousands of dollars on iPhones and computers if it was not improving their life? Also, he does have a point about hard work, because I do see a lot of conservatives fall into this trap of defending capitalism. Like, hey, it's all about hard work. But there's nothing really inherently valuable about hard work. What separates capitalism from hard work is the freedom to use your mind and the freedom to bring good ideas and concretize them and bring them into existence. For instance, so if someone were to go to the Mojave Desert and just dig holes and dig trenches for 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, yeah, that would be hard work. That would be physically demanding. It would be really exhausting and tiring. But if digging those trenches and holes, if they're not serving a purpose, if they're not serving anyone of any value, then why should the person digging those holes get paid anything? They're not serving a purpose. They're not producing a value. Contrast that with someone like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, who, when they write books, they're probably just sitting at a desk or laying in bed with a laptop, typing out their stories. You would say that's probably not backbreaking work. It's probably not exhausting work. They're probably not going to have any physical ailments in their later years from writing Pet Sematary or Harry Potter or whatever. So you probably say, oh, that's not really that hard work. They're just sitting at a computer in the comfort of air-conditioned homes. They can eat chips, potato chips, or donuts while they're doing it. It's not that hard work, but it's valuable. Why? Because millions of people are willing to hand over $5, $10, $20, however much their books cost. There are millions of people willing to pay for that in exchange for a copy of Pet Sematary or Harry Potter, because those books provide people with values. It makes people happier. It inspires people.
Fortunately, that game is severely rigged, such that for every worker who does manage to break into the capitalist caste of billionaires, there are millions of workers who suffer and toil in misery from the cradle to the grave. Some folks say that if...
Again, where are these countries? I mean, is this in America? These don't look like beacons of capitalism. But again, every society has to start somewhere. You know, America, you know, after the American Revolution or even the Civil War, it's not like overnight we had iPhones and cars and all that stuff. No, America started as an agrarian society and had to build itself up, and lots of people had to work tough jobs, even though it did raise their standard of living, and that's the only way things can get better. People have to go through that miserable process of industrialization. That's just reality. Contrast that with communist countries that tried to industrialize, and you had to have central planners like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong starving millions of people so that they could trade food for industrial products, for people to come in and build factories for them, because under communism in socialist countries, you don't have the freedom to think, so why would anyone think to refine steel, improve steel making, refine oil into gasoline, develop assembly lines to produce automobiles?
If we got rid of capitalism, universal laziness would take over society and nobody would work anymore because there'd be no incentive. This position ignores the fact that in capitalist society, the people who work the hardest make the least amount of money, and the people with the greatest fortunes, the capitalists, live out their days in luxurious laziness. Capitalism isn't...
Again, if the capitalists are producing value and if they're making their money honestly through voluntary exchange and trading, they can party on yachts all they want. They earned it. It's like, do people who go to work, does the working class, do they get to have fun? Someone who, works hard, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, are they allowed to buy PlayStation 4s? Are they allowed to go on nice vacations? Are they allowed to enjoy leisurely time? Who's allowed to enjoy leisurely time?
An engine that robs wealth from the working people of the world and transfers it to a small number of capitalists who feel entitled to our money. It had its time...
Our money? No, wealth is created under capitalism, and the people who create the wealth get to do with that wealth as they see fit. It's not our money. This is a fundamental difference from people on the left and individualists. They see all money as society's money. People like me, I see my money is my money, your money is your money, your brother's money is your brother's money, your friend's money is your friend's money, your dad's money is your dad's money. But people like this just see all money as society's money. It's our money. Get the fuck out of here.
Time and place in history, it was admittedly a great step forward from feudalism, but it's outworn its usefulness, and now's the time for capitalism to be dismantled so that humanity can fulfill our true potential.
Look at that, hammer and
There's
sickle.
a lot more to be said about capitalism. In my next video, we'll talk more about wages and...
Yeah, this is what the alternative to capitalism. How many times do we have to run this experiment? He talks about, the betterment of the working class. Was life better for working class under Soviet Russia or communist China or under the Khmer Rouge or under communist Cuba? Or was life better for the working class in more capitalist countries like America? Fucking communist.